Now, we are going to be looking at our product roadmap for part of our presentation today. So in order to properly set our expectations there, we need to review Salesforce's forward-looking statement slide. Now, for anybody who's unfamiliar, this slide urges Salesforce customers to make any purchasing decisions based only on currently available functionality at the time of purchase.
Hi, I'm Deborah Strusenberg, and I'm Senior Product Manager for Knowledge. I have some great things to announce again about Knowledge this release. Really happy to be bringing this to you all. The first part of what I'm talking about today is just extending the reach and visibility of Knowledge. We talked about that in our last release. Michael talked about what's happening in Embedded with Knowledge being available through Embedded as well. And one of the ways that we're also extending reach is by adding read access for Knowledge to Chatter Plus and Force.com licenses. So there may be some question around exactly which licenses this applies to. I definitely recommend that you talk to your account rep about that to get some more clarity. For example, the Chatter free and Force.com free licenses, it's not included in that, but there are other Chatter and Force.com licenses that it is included in. The purpose of doing this is that, sometimes when users are using these particular licenses, you may not be able to purchase a full license for them just to be able to read the Knowledge articles. And you don't intend for them to actually be authoring Knowledge, but you need them to actually have access to read. And so this is the purpose of us adding read access to these licenses. So when you're using, you're using Knowledge to collect important information about your business that you want to share out internally or with your customers, it's really important that we make sure that they can access it where they need to be. And we figured that Chatter, the users of Chatter and Force.com have a need to be able to read articles, and the folks that you have that are authoring them need to be able to share that with them. And so in the past, you would actually have had to buy a full add-on Knowledge license just to allow Chatter Plus and Force.com users to be able to even see a Knowledge article. And we didn't think that made a lot of sense. If you're not intending for them to have authoring rights, then we wanted to extend that reach and just make it possible for them to be able to see what you're actually collecting. So that's what's happening with those licenses. So for more clarity, I do recommend talking to your account rep and making sure that it's appropriate or that it works for the licensing model that you have in place. Next is page layouts for Knowledge. This is something that we've heard again and again, that people wanted to have more flexibility. Knowledge page layout, we've had one page layout per article type for now many years, and in Spring 16, we've added the ability to have multiple page layouts and assign them per profile. And this is one of our top 10 Idea Exchange ideas, so I'm really happy that we're getting it out there and delivering this functionality. And it's actually going to just extend as we add additional new platform features to the product going forward. So this is one step in the right direction, and you'll see more functionality taking advantage of that as we go forward in the next coming releases. So in this screen, you can see that we have a couple of different page layouts assigned, and they're associated with different profiles. So I'll show that in setup when I do the demo. The next great feature that I'm really happy to announce is validation rules. And this is, again, one of our top 10 requested Idea Exchange features for Knowledge. Really adds an amazing set of power to Knowledge. I'm sure you've used it many times with other objects within Salesforce, and we've heard the requests. I've talked to many people at Dreamforce the last couple of years about how important this was to you, and so really happy to announce that we have validation rules now. So I just wanted to share a couple of use cases of how you might use validation rules with Knowledge, and I'll demo these as well. So maybe you want to have a field required per article type, so you can use it for that purpose. Really, for anyone who's not familiar with validation rules or who doesn't use them already, the purpose behind them is to keep data integrity and to set some rules about which articles can be saved if the data doesn't match that. So it will actually not allow you to save the article if it doesn't meet the criteria that you have set. So in this case, you can use it to say that a field is required in a specific article type. That's a good basic use case. You can say that it's required if the value of another field is set to something specific, either a pick list or just a regular text field. So you can kind of make it dependent on if one field is set to a certain value, then now I have a dependency that this value in a separate field has certain requirements around what is contained there. I'll demo that. It's a little easier to see it, but then you may also have a user with specific information in their user record that they can only modify certain fields in an article. I can show you a demo of that as well. And you could say that a user with a specific user profile also can only set, for example, the channel. This has been a long-standing request because channel has not had field level security on it in articles. And so you can use validation rules to say only people with a certain profile or a certain field in their user record can set the channel to, let's say, maybe they have to only use internal only, or only certain people with a certain profile can set it to public. So that's a really important functionality that in the past, you had to create, you had to create workflows and approval processes to manage that because the field itself could not be contained that way. So validation rules is a great way to solve this particular problem that's been longstanding and that I know people have asked me how to work around that in the past. And then just a final use case is a field is required when validation status is set to certain values. So maybe if you have a validation status field set to work in progress, maybe you don't care if certain fields are set because you know that people are still working on the article. But at the point in time that the article has moved along in its life cycle and moved to a state of validated or validated external, which is what you would put it in when you're sharing it out to your customer base, you may want to make sure that certain fields have been filled out. So for example, you don't want it to go out with an empty resolution field or an empty symptoms field or workaround or whatever it is. So you can use validation rules to make sure that that is also taken care of. Couple of quick notes about knowledge validation rules. Validation rules will always show at the top of the layout, and that's just because of the way that the knowledge layouts are still a little bit different. We are working on that, as Michael mentioned before. We are working on knowledge for Lightning in coming releases, not in spring, but we're working on it coming soon. And so as we move forward, you'll have more flexibility about where you put your validation rules. But for now, they will show at the top of your page layout. A second item to mention is that error messages will only show one at a time. We are working on this particular item. We're hoping that we will actually have that addressed within the summer 16 release. But for now, if you had multiple validation rules that were failing, you would only get one message at a time, and then you would have to fix that issue, and then you would get the next one and fix it after that. And then the final item I wanted to mention is that there are a couple of fields about an article that cannot be used within the validation rule. For example, case association count. That's another item that we are planning to fix, but it may take us a couple releases to get there. So look at the documentation to figure out which fields those are. All right, so let's just get to the demo. Mostly it's to show you those use cases. When you go into setup, you'd go to the knowledge section. You would go into the article types themselves. And I have everything set up in this troubleshooting article, so we'll go into that one. Troubleshooting article type. And you can see now that there are both page layouts, which that section was there in the past, but you were only able to add one layout per article type. So now you can add multiple. This is what we were looking at before. And so I can show you that in the page layout, in this page layout, we have just one section here with information. And if I go back to the other page layout, I've added a separate section with internal comments in it. And it doesn't have to be this way. You can actually move the fields around. It could be a completely different layout, but just for the this purpose, I just was showing that there's a different section and a different field in this particular one. In fact, I actually added a separate field here as well for this page layout. And then just like you would assign page layouts in any other part of Salesforce, you would go to page layout assignment, and then you can choose out of all of your profiles, which page layout they should be using. So this was a really exciting development, and I'm happy to have that and to share it with you all. So let's go to our validation rules. I think it may be useful to see some of this in action. So we talked about that you could have a certain field that is required. So let's just look at this one. So we said, okay, the valid symptoms are required. If we look at the error message itself, it says symptoms are required for troubleshooting article. If the this is you know what, I'm gonna skip. That's a more complicated one. Let's go through them in a little bit more easy path. Okay. Validation status cannot be external. Let's look at that one. So I'm going to go into my test article here. I'm sorry, I'm going through it before I've even shown you how we've set that up. So it's very simple. It just says that the pick list for validation status, if it's validated external, it's going to fail. And it's going to give me this message that validation status cannot be external. So it's a very simple, straightforward setup. So if I go to my article, I've edited the article, and if I put it into that status validation external, and I save it, I get this error message, validation status cannot be external. So it won't allow me to save. So that was just a very basic use case, that easy sample one. Let's cancel out of that. Let's go back to this and okay, let's go to this use case here. So for this one, we are saying that the symptoms field is required if the validation status is set to validated or validated external. So that means that if I save it as one of the other validation statuses, that will be no problem. But as soon as I move validation status to one of these values, I cannot save without the symptoms being there. So let's go back to that. Okay, so in this case, I actually do have some symptoms here. So I'm gonna just X that out for a minute. And, oops. And so because this validation status is work in progress, I should have no problem getting that out. Okay, so everything's saved, no problem with that. But as soon as I move the validation status to validated and try to save, now it says that I have a problem. And this is really important because validation status is what we use for kind of managing your article life cycles. So this is a really critical way. I know that I've had many people ask me again how to manage this. And the way that we would do it before validation rules is through approval processes and workflow. But that can get complex, and it can especially get complex with various article types. And you may have different workflows that you want to maintain for other purposes, and so it just makes the whole approval process and workflow complex to manage. So I think this is a really great addition to how to work with validation status and use some very simple tools to get there. All right, let's look at a couple other use cases. I just wanted to really make sure that I showed one more at least, which is using either your profile. Well, I'll show you both, but we don't necessarily need to go through them both. I can show you one example of it. But for those of you that use KCS methodology, one of the things that we talk about a lot is how to make sure that you have control over what people do based on their KCS role. And sometimes people will do that by creating an actual profile. Sometimes we do it through public groups. One easy way, if you really think that your profile is mostly the same and you don't want to have different profiles for each KCS role, and for those of you who don't know what KCS is, just go ahead and ignore this for a minute. But for a lot of our knowledge customers, they do know. This is KCS is a methodology. I should take a step back for a minute. KCS is a very rich methodology for managing knowledge, created by the Consortium for Service Innovation. And for anyone that wants to find out more about that, you can find it on serviceinnovation.org. It's a great organization. I've been involved with them for many years and have used the KCS methodology actually in an organization that I was running their knowledge program actually too. So I highly recommend looking into it. But just very quickly about that, there are different roles that people have been given different levels of ability to publish articles based on their experience in the role that they've been given. So just wanted to click over to, this is a user profile. I'm logged in as you can see I have the name actually set to KCS candidate. This is a role in the KCS methodology. But one of the things that I did was, because I didn't want to actually have to set a whole profile that's different, because really basically things are mostly the same, then I've actually put a field into their user profile that says KCS candidate and who their coach is. So that's one way you could do this. Another way is by assigning a profile to a user. So I'll show that as well. So if we go actually to our KCS candidate, they have their profile is KCS support. And so when we go over and look at this validation role, you can set that if the profile does not contain support in it, then that person can only set the channel to internal only. You could do this other ways too. You could say, like I was mentioning with the KCS candidate, I could say that if they're of a certain role in their user profile, that they have to be up to a certain role before we would allow them to set the channel. So there's a lot of options available. I will have these in the documentation and suggested tips around how to use validation rules with knowledge. But just to demo this particular one, so because I am logged in as a KCS candidate and I do have support in my profile, I should be able to change the channel of this article that we were working with to have, customer, partner, public. I can do all of it. And I'm going to have to put my symptoms back in, so let's do that. Okay. Let's save that. Oh no. Oh, that's right, because okay. Let me show you why. So that error message came in because I do have that. So this is an interesting combination, and this is where I was saying before that different error messages may come up. So because I've set their profile, we looked at the validation rule, I have set that their profile because they have support in their profile, they should have access. But I also set that the KCS role in their profile, the actual field, if they are a KCS candidate, which is somebody who's actually being trained still, if they're a KCS candidate, they're not allowed to set that channel. So let me go ahead and fix that and log out. See, I did get that message, so that's actually showing it is working as expected and as it should. Let's get out of this particular article. And okay, we are online. Let's log out and log back in. So I'm going to log in as somebody who should be authorized because they are not a KCS candidate, they're a KCS publisher, which is somebody that is authorized to actually publish with more capability. So we have the KCS publisher. They're coming in. I'm going to go back to here we go. I'm going to edit the article. Okay, and now because I'm a KCS publisher, oops, I now have the ability to set these and save. Oh no. Demo issues.
It's okay. Well, I think our customers are definitely
Yep.
catching the gist of the kinds of value that we're introducing to a KCS, a knowledge-centered solution
Yes.
with the use of these validation
Yes,
rules.
yes.
Great. So since we've done such a good job of introducing these new valuable components to our customers, I think it's valuable for us to find out what our customers are saying about what they've just seen.
Oh, well, okay. So you're getting lots of shout outs for the validation rules
Yay!
on knowledge. And Steve says, stick that in your attachment articles. So I think he was actually using attachments to clarify stuff in knowledge articles because he didn't have this functionality.
Right.
I love this question, though. Can you update the article type on an existing article? Currently, this is a limitation, and will this be coming in a future release? So number one, can you do an update on an article type? And then what would the process be to do that?
So the answer to that is no. We are working towards, in upcoming releases, it's not in spring and it's not in summer, but we are working towards, hopefully by winter, having a pilot or hopefully maybe even a beta version of actually moving away from article types and moving to using record types. And while it probably won't be available when we first beta and release knowledge with record types, we have been working on a plan for being able to make a change of your article type when you're changing from one record type to another. There's already patterns for doing that with cases, so you can see that and play with that functionality in a custom object or in a case where you can switch from one record type to another. And so our plan is to be able to implement that at some point once we release knowledge with record types. It's a little tricky with knowledge. It's a little more tricky with knowledge than it is with other objects because we have to think about what happens to all of the other versions. What if you've been translating? What happens to all of the translations? Do all of them switch to the new type? But then that may mess with your data integrity. Should they stay in a different record type? So there's a lot to consider, but that is something that we're working on and thinking about how to solve.
That was a good question.
Yeah.
This is a great question. So we use approval processes for our FAQs, and they want to know which would run first, the new validation rule or the approval processes. And I believe that a validation rule runs on the save event, correct?
Yes, yeah, the validation rule would definitely run first.
Okay, so you're saving the record, whereas an approval process is something that you initiate
Right.
after a save, correct?
That's right.
Do I have
That's
that
right. You have that right. It will have to pass the validation rules before it would get sent to the approval process.
Yeah, so that should answer your question that validation rule will run first. And then I am seeing that, is there a plan to support validation rules on knowledge based on categories? That's an interesting question, and I haven't explored that.
Yeah, we would like to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there yet. Data categories are complex, and it's just a little trickier part to be able to solve. But yeah, we would like to do that, but it is not in there in the spring release.